In this video, I'm giving you an update on the watering practices that I've changed to about a year ago. So if you're new to the channel, I garden out in the Phoenix, Arizona area. Our summer temperatures can get up to 120. We have very little humidity. Right now we have a dry spell where no rainfall and triple digits. We've been in the 110s for the last week, and that's not really uncommon here. So I've been gardening out in this area for about 7 years now. For 5+ of those 7 years, I practiced what many of the so-called garden experts preached, which was to do an infrequent irrigation, but do it deeply. So put down a large volume of water, but don't do it every day. During those years, and this type of weather where we would be seeing highs in the 110s plus, I would practice a twice-a-week application of water. So my irrigation zones would run anywhere between 40 minutes and an hour. So speaking from experience, those first few years when I was doing that deep irrigation, my trees grew, they fruited, but the fruit quality was poor on the plants that were producing or ripening fruit in the high heat months like June, July, and August. In between those deep watering sessions, the soil would dry out. The plant would go into some stress, and the moisture just isn't there in that fruit. It's going to dry out on the tree. So I would have issues where the fig fruit would literally desiccate on the branch, or the fig would just abort and drop the fruit. So rewinding back to around this time last year, I made the switch to where I no longer did that twice-a-week deep irrigation, but I started doing a daily application of water. So it's going to vary by tree, age of the tree and all, but essentially I'm watering 4 times a day, just in the high heat summer months, not, year round, but just when it needs it, when there's a lot of transpiration in the leaves. So my zones during this time are going 4 times a day, 10, 12, 2, and 4 p.m. The amount of water going to each tree is going to depend on a couple factors beyond just the watering duration and number of times that the session runs. It's also going to matter on how open that I have the irrigation head, because I do have adjustable flow rates on every single emitter in the yard that allows me to really tailor how much volume I put down to each tree depending on the age and the type of the tree. The other factor is how many emitters do I have. For trees, I tend to have 2 emitters, one on either side of the trunk. For a young tree, I would just have 1. In general, I'm dropping somewhere between 2 and 4 gallons of water per day per tree. So by doing this, I've not only dropped my water consumption significantly, because I'm watering less in total volume than I was when I was doing deep waterings, but I'm also providing that tree that incremental water it needs, and so I'm getting really good quality figs now. And any other kind of fruit that I'm trying to ripen, at this time of the year, it's getting the water it needs. So we'll walk through the yard, we'll look at some examples. I'm going to talk about the irrigation head placement as well. I'm going to also show you a chart showing current year consumption versus prior year. And keep in mind, I have a very large yard. It's 3 times the average lot size, almost 19,000 square feet. I grow on roughly half of it. I have probably around 150 emitters in the yard, just to give you an idea, given how many plants that I have growing here. I probably have around 200 plants and trees growing in this yard. So let's talk really quickly about these emitters. As you can see, this mango tree that's young has 1 emitter very close to the trunk. I do that so that I ensure that the watering radius is hitting all of that topsoil and making sure that this root ball does not dry out. So definitely any tree that's a year or younger is going to have 1 emitter very close to the trunk. These are fully adjustable to a closed position all the way up to something like 20 gallons per hour. So this is essentially like a 1 gallon plant, so it doesn't need a whole lot of water. shooting beyond, its main root ball right now. So for this plant, I've got this adjusted so that when it sprays, it's saturating around a 2-foot radius around the plant. So it's definitely hitting that immediate root ball, as well as a little bit beyond that, encouraging the roots to spread out. Next year, I will adjust the spray head here and maybe expand it fully so that it's now hitting a 6-foot radius. For those plants that I have in the ground that have been there for 3 years or more, I will position the emitters a little bit differently. I will have 2 essentially on either side of the trunk. So this is my Namdok Mai mango that's been in ground for 4 years now. You can see that I've got an emitter right here, about 18 inches away. And then I've got another one right here on this side. So I've got those sprayers nearly fully open, and between the 2 of them, it's covering the entire footprint of the canopy and beyond. So that's in general how I position the emitters. And I changed my watering practices last year. I did it across the board. So all these plants are experiencing the same thing, whether it's Turk's cap hibiscus, a shrub like pineapple guava, banana plants, anything that I've got growing in the yard, it's all getting a frequent irrigation. Because these plants are hydrated, they can tolerate day after day of 110-degree temperatures. They will actively push growth. I just put this Inga in, this ice cream bean tree in. This was sitting in a container and had afternoon shade. Even putting it into more of a full sun location here, where it's getting that late afternoon sun blasting on it, you can see that it's putting on all this new growth. It would not be doing that if it was only getting watered twice a week. Let's take a look at this zone watering. Here you can see an example of a young tree getting irrigated. Spray head is hitting the circumference of the plant, wetting that root zone and beyond. So in this area, you can see that I pretty much have irrigation heads covering the entire canopy of these trees, spacing them on either side of the trunk. So beyond wetting the whole root zone of the plant and beyond, it's also wetting the mulch that's covering the soil. So that's going to invite in the bugs. You will not find bugs in your soil if the mulch is all dried out and the topsoil is dry. That's not an inviting environment. So this frequent irrigation ensures that the mulch is constantly moist. At the end of this 4-minute session, the ground is completely saturated here. And the way that I wound up with 4 minutes was using a soil probe. My goal was to saturate the soil to 12 inches of depth. So for your yard, it may take less or more time to achieve that. So every yard is different. I really encourage you to do some investigation and figure out how much water is required, again, to hit that 12-inch depth. And that's going to determine how long you need to run your sessions. So instead of just talking to you about the results of this change, let's actually see the trees, see how they're doing with this irrigation style. So we're actually under the canopy of my Subel white sapote. This tree's been in ground for a long time. In the past, this tree has really struggled when it had the infrequent deep irrigation. It would drop almost all its leaves. You can see it's holding fruit, lots of fruit right now. The leaves are cycling, where you'll see some yellow leaves, but a lot of new growth as well. So the danger is when your tree gets stressed and drops, nearly all of its foliage, like this had done in the past. That exposes the tree to sunburn, because there is a period in between when those leaves have to grow back. So that can really damage your tree. Did not do that this year. Another thing to note is this black sapote would never hold fruit in the past. And I'm seeing that fruit. I'm gonna try to zoom in at the top here because that's where most of the fruit is. But I have dozens of fruit set on this black sapote, which in years past only set one fruit its entire 7 years in the ground here. So I think that's a fairly significant improvement. Now, it's not to say that all this fruit will ripen, but I've never had the promise of so much fruit in a year. Longan's a pretty tough tree, and even under infrequent irrigation could do okay for you. But you can see how much more fruit set I have this year. Not only did the flowers not dry out as much so that it could set more fruit, but also the fruit that it did set, it was able to keep. In years past, it would thin a lot of that fruit off, self-thin. I don't think I really need to go into detail on the figs. I've shown you lots of tasting videos. The fig trees, just phenomenal change by doing frequent irrigation. Here I've got a quince and an apple tree, loads of apples. Both of them are putting on the same amount of growth, if not more, and a whole lot of fruit set. At 10 plus years in the ground, citrus trees are doing just fine, holding lots of fruit and clearly lots of growth. If you grow bamboo, you've likely already observed that these plants like a frequent irrigation. They absolutely look better with this kind of watering schedule. If they only get watered twice a week, chances are the foliage is going to dry up. It's not going to put on as many shoots. And it's just in general not going to look that great. Will it survive under an infrequent deep irrigation? Absolutely. But it's not going to drink the water that you're flooding on it, and it's going to dry out in between. Let's look at some younger trees, see how they're doing. So with blueberry plants, of course, if you were to only irrigate them a couple times a week, they are going to fry in our temperatures. Not only do I have these shade protected, but they too are getting multiple waterings each day, and you can see absolutely no burn to the leaves. The plant is even fruiting right now. So this is my Premier Loquat, fairly young plant, been in the ground for around a year. And you can see right now, even though it's super hot and loquats don't really like our summers, it's putting on new growth. It has a shallow fibrous root system, so it needs that frequent irrigation. In the past, I really struggled with loquat, again, because I was drying out the plant, it was going under stress, the leaves would cook. You can see that's not the case here. So with guavas, you know, you really cannot overwater them. They love water. And having this go several times a day, this plant's enjoying it. So for those of you that wanted an update, want to kind of learn how this process went, hopefully this has answered all your questions. If you do have additional ones, please post them below and I will get back to you on that. So certainly do what makes sense for you. If you are applying a different irrigation style and it's working for you, there's no need to change something that's already working. In my experience, having a bill that was, you know, upwards of $250 in summer was just too much. I wanted to reduce that cost and also that consumption. And like I've mentioned repeatedly, I was having issues with the quality of the fruit, summer fruit. So for me, this change has worked really well. It's solved those two issues that I've had. At least so far, I haven't seen those salts build up or any kind of detrimental action from watering often. So if anything, what I hope you take away from this video is if you are struggling with your trees and the watering schedule that you've got them on, if they just don't look good, experiment. You know, trees are like people, they're all different, so you have to adjust sometimes and play with things to figure out that sweet spot. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.